Good morning. Welcome to the second episode of our series, Colombia. It keeps looking for the center. Elections 2027. My name is Marta Marco, Vice President of the Colombian Canadian Council for the Americans. Now it is a pleasure to introduce our guest, Jorge Enrique Robledo, co-founder of the original party commitment and candidate to the Senate. And our host of the series, Sandra Borda, professor and researcher at the University of Los Angeles, and David Franco, president of our Canadian Council for the Americans. And that will give you the floor to Sandra to start the conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Marta. A very good morning, everybody. Uh, Welcome to this second episode of our series. 4 years ago, we have the first leftist government that took power in Colombia. But in addition to these results, that process of election was a scenario for the organization of the political forces that have been also trying to um, working with the recent successful successes and some failures. The political center of the Canadian Council for the Americans began the first season of this series about the political center in Colombia, thinking about this new political current and talking to key actors who have relevant access to the construction of the agenda and the platform of the center independently, obviously, of their party affiliation. The results at the time, well, 3 years ago, were not as favorable for what we call the political center, with rate of participation of 55%, the highest in the last 20 years. Gustavo Petra had 40% of the votes on the first round. Rodolfo Hernandez at 28%. Federico Gutierrez, representative of the central right, 23%, and the Central Fajardo, perhaps the most important representative, only had 4%. The Congress also, uh, we had 20 senators and 20 representatives. The Conservative Party, 14 senators and 32 representatives for the Liberal, and the Democratic Center, 13 senators and 16 representatives. The two slates of the political centers had low results. The coalition, Green Alliance, had 13 uh, senators and 12 representatives, and the neoliberalism didn't have any in the Senate and only two in the House. Today, 3 years afterwards, in a little starting a new round of elections in Colombia, this this new round of the Canadian Council for the Americas with me, Sandra Worley, myself, the Department of Political Science at the University of Los Angeles, is trying to get a balance of what the political exercise of the center as an opposition force and to see the details of what they are right now, or the political protagonists, and how they see the near future, obviously, through the voices of the politicians that are part of this force. Today, in our second episode in this series about the political center in Colombia, we welcome Jorge Enrique Robledo, as Marco said, a co-founder of the, well, the party equity, commitment, equality, and also a ex-Senator Senator Robledo, and when soon to be Senator again. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Thank you for your hospitality, Martha and Kenneth. Also, my greeting to all of you. For all those, good morning. Jorge, let's start by going back. Let's do let's make a balance of the actions of the political center, and I'll ask you to discuss this expression, political center, that it has. That you have something to say about that. Uh, what we do is to language economy. Uh, the easiest way to do what we have in our minds. But what is your balance of what's happened since the past elections until right now with the political force that you're part of? What evaluations do you have of what happened independently of the oppositions that you had in the Congress? How do you see things so far in terms of this political force that you're part of? Let's start by saying that center in geometry is perfect. You know exactly what the center is. Uh, but in politics, in Colombia, it doesn't say much. I would rather use the idea of rather than using the geometry, it's better to see if we have a third option. We have one side, the forces of the Petristas, and the other hand, the forces that ruled Colombia for over 100 years until 2022. Uh, 22 is historical important date because, well, the first time in, at least in throughout the 20th century, we have had somebody who doesn't have a political origin and came to the head of the government. But that's uh, not near here nor there. But what does that define us as? Uh, we don't have any commitments. This would not be Petrista forced. I shared with Polo Democrático something several years ago, and one of the reasons I left the Polo was that when Petro took over the party, that way that day I quit. And they says we're not in the same uh, page, so we have met for a long time ago. Sergio Fajardo has another origin. He has always been independent in Colombia. Sergio has never belonged to the traditional parties. Uh, he has his own force, and now he's not with us. But we have different origins, and obviously we don't agree. But Fajardo, we've never backed any projects of the projects that have won the previous elections. That's one of the uh, falsehoods that they tell him about how to. They're trying to classify him like that, but uh, uh, in his 20 years of political struggle, he is independent of all the political forces in Colombia. Those who are not Colombian, perhaps were not the friends of the same guys with the same people. Uh, uh, in 1930, we had somebody there, and they're still, they're giving us working. I like to be like a third party. Eh, we are not either with the past governments or with their divisions of the political parties or with the historical pact that we have right now. We're building a third option, third possibility, a different way to do things in Colombia. Thank you, Jorge Enrique. So now we understand a little bit what you are not. Uh, as the third option, we understand what you don't want. My question is, what do you want? What are the principles of this third option? The programs, etc. So we, for this campaign, electoral campaign, we created a coalition. But let's not do today, right now, we are a coalition called Ahora Colombia, Now Colombia. It's set up by three political forces. We, Dignidad, Compromiso, Commitment, the neoliberalism, which is an original, it's a long time ago from the political Liberal Party. It's what's left now of that force, and another force which is called Bila Party. Certain religious origins, but it is not a political organization, but rather a political party. Now we agreed on 10 points to set up our slates for Senate and the Chamber. Sergio Fajardo is creating, or already, this is what is the program that we're going to be using, that are going to be part of this campaign, the elections. And out of that coalition, we have another candidate, Juan Manuel Galan. He comes from neoliberalism. So right now in the coalition we have for the chamber and the house. And before the end of the year, we might have some agreements with other parties. Juan Manuel Galán and Sergio Fernandez. That is more or less the scheme. There's some things that put us together. We have agreement, those 10 points. There's something that for us is very important and it differentiates us from the others. Zero tolerance to corruptions and to corrupt individuals. Nothing to do with the corruption. We have huge disagreements. Right? Those who are ruling Colombia today or who have governed Colombia. Major emphasis on violence. We have rejected violence uh, the whole life. I have 54 years I've been interested in politics. I've never had anything to do with violence. This is something important here. Those important topics our concern for the uh, living conditions. Living conditions right now are horrible because this is an economy with $7,000. We're not in a huge economy. Or we are in favor of developing the production sources. We can't live without less than $7,000. We have to make a major effort to create conditions that allow us to create more jobs, more employment, and more wealth. Because the capitalism we have of $7,000 per inhabitant, which is we won't be able to solve our problems under those conditions. So Sergio has been very close to the situation. Also, he was a university professor. Me too. So we will be building the program based on that. What our origins and what is the independence vis-a-vis those who are in power and those who have ruled previously. Who's going to define the principles? Are there civil organizations that are trying to reach a consensus or an understanding of what could be the agenda for the center? Uh, so, what do you think? What do you think? Who should define those principles? I'm not very much a friend of center. Well, the issue of violence, the issue of anti-corruption are extremely important positions. Very important because in Colombia, the issue of corruption uh, in politics, including Petrismo, which is supposed to have, we're going to fight against that, came to Congress. They, the presidency came to the presidency because they sold the devil. They're sold to the devil. That's very important. And I know about a lot of, I know a lot about corruption. I've published a lot about it. One of the major problems that we have in Colombia is that there's a huge percentage of officials that are bought either openly or underhandedly. They bought. This have a very serious problem because with money stolen from the state, they buy the votes, they steal the elections, and you can get to lead to the state, and they don't meet any of the promises they made. We call them the marmalade. Uh, they show how political heads, traditional forces, whatever their origin, uh, do their politics. So there's no way to collect for political errors because a very important part of the votes are votes that are not originated in the political debate. There's a purchase sale operation, the votes fraud. We have a register in Colombia. He said this register. He says in Colombia they still they steal the elections before they vote. They vote when voting and after voting. So and they explain how they move the voters how they before the votes to buy the votes. There's all sorts of fraud and corruption systems in the elections. And after that, because they also steal votes in the registry. Uh, so one of the things that Gustavo Petro is there so far, the situation is very serious because there's not been uh, a decision, but he won the elections with huge numbers that were invested in an electoral campaign, violating all the maximums that allowed by the state. And that is a criminal offense. It's a criminal offense. So the current president, Petro, is involved in a criminal crime. And the president of Ecopetrol, which is the biggest, was the manager of the campaign, is involved in that. Uh, it's an important topic of the debate. One of the things that we've been that makes me agree with Sergio Guajardo. We have never been uh, in a dirty deal, so this is what we're fighting against. Uh, Let me uh, ask about some things that have been a topic of debate about that the idea of having an anti-corruption position and not being part or going hand in hand with previous administrations. The the first issue that I'd like to you tell me about is what's happened to the founder of the Maria Luisa Pilateve, who basically just came to the conclusion that there are some inconsistencies with the payment of taxes. They've lost a fight with the tax administration that is going to have to pay a major amount of money. How do you see that in that position, anti-corruption that you're talking? The other topic is has to do with the past elections. You say we haven't gone hand in hand with previous administrations. Uh, but one of the main figures in the campaign, in the last campaign, was Juan Fernando Cristo, who was been very much tied to the Santos administration. And we know that he was a protagonist of the Petro administration. Uh, there are also people such as former ministers of previous administration. Are they forbidden for that exercise? What is the criteria for those who can or cannot be part of this mission of this type? And the last question, which is something that Vicky Avila said, that she has also made a lot of noise recently, is the hiring the Sergio Fajardo for the Anthony Gutierrez as an advisor, which was the same campaign advisor for Gustavo Petro. You said you have always said that what matters is not only the election, the decisions make, but also the way you do politics that also affects the decisions. Both things are equally important. Isn't that a little inconsistent? Because we criticize so much the way of doing electoral policies of Gustavo Petro and end up by hiring exactly the same election advisors. I've asked about it. Some research, what I've heard is that it's not necessarily oh, a technician in electoral campaign advice must think the same as the candidate that they are advising. That doesn't match the truth. I think there's a mistake in this position. If I discovered that I have the same car to take to the same workshop as somebody who is corrupt, we simply agree, coincide there. He's the same mechanic, but that doesn't make me, an accomplice. So there's a little uh, disproportionate there because there's a figure of the advisor who is not looking at the content. He doesn't even have to look at the content, but he's looking at the ways. And it's for this, what is proper, a lot of radio, a lot of TV, newspaper, the color of the poster, the way you look at in the pictures. It, that's another statement, what they're saying. I don't accept that theory. The fact that he was an advisor for Petro, I can't have to veto. No, no, that was out of proportion. It only happens in the electoral campaign in Colombia. What, what, if something is characteristic of Fajardo is that his absolute independence from all traditional parties, especially from Petro. Petro was voted in blank in 2018 and 22. Chose not to vote with vote Potra. Petro offered a ministry to Fajardo, and he said, "We have nothing to do with Petro." I think that this is it's a very wild idea. Well, this is Colombia, and things happen. You have to be patient like a job. Uh, and if they go that way, I don't want to. Uh, I don't want to look at what the photographs, the pictures, it's a crime now. So we need people to be sensible. And about the two issues about Marisa Piriquivi and Fernando Cristo in the last campaigns, so just to give you an idea, I don't know Miss Maria Luisa. I hadn't seen her in my life. I have no references about it. We have no political agreement with her, not at all. But if if there's some accusations, well, let her defend herself, and the authorities should act. But that doesn't. But this is it's a forced relationship because somebody has a religious vision and agrees with somebody else in a religious vision. So I have uh, somebody who has a religious vision also. That doesn't mean that we agree with. I lived in Manizales my whole life, but I am not responsible for every person in Manizales. These are things that are taken out of proportion. The other thing was the, the ministers and all that. We have a position about that. I'm a superintendent origin for sure. Nobody can say otherwise. That's true, but that doesn't mean that I cannot join somebody who was in a force which I was against. But they get out of that force, so the circumstances change. Obviously, we have some moral minimum lines. So if somebody was a conservative or liberal, uh, I at that time I will not make any agreement. But if they get out of that party, and we can, they're not what they used to be. Now we have to look at the current situation. But it would be otherwise it would be impossible to do a coalition. If I have a force with 10 friends, we'll never have a cup of coffee together because they were used to be political enemies. Usually the debate is very mediocre. So in each case, when we're going to have an agreement, we have to look at it. Or we have to look at the past. But it's not a mortal sin that if that somebody was in another party, we'd have to analyze it case by case. What I don't agree is those political forces that have been so harmful to Colombia or that are who are ruling today. For example, the Petro administration, for example. Or perhaps in 5 years I might agree with somebody else. We'll have to wait and see. 4 years ago, or 3 years, the third option failed terribly in terms of elections. In 7 years also they lost. And when I hear the messages from the Center Anti-Corruption, Education, no more the same with the same. Uh, I remember the messages 3 and 7 years ago. My question is, why is this going to be successful? And what is the third option? Well, the people from the third option have learned from the previous failures. We learned from the previous one, the Centro Esperanza Coalition, that we made a mistake, as I have had to say it. We opened our doors so widely that it went crazy. It created 1,000 problems. It's a main, principal, main, secondary. That also really followed us up. We know that we're moving very carefully in this situation. Who are going to be here? Those who are going to be part of this movement. But I also would say that it wasn't really that we did poorly. That was significant, but I have a different theory. I believe strongly in how we are victims of circumstances. We had a very complicated campaign. It was a challenge, those who have challenged previously for a long time. That was big enough in politics. And then Petro came out of nothing and went to the second round. We had to escape from the group. We had we are a weaker force in that equation, and we corrected a number of not. We made some mistakes we shouldn't have made, but now the Petro was just Petro without a mask. He's been. Uh, we're not going to be buying any more BS right now. Petrus had a deal with the devil, and if you deal with the devil, you know how that ends. They have the worst in politics right now. They have no scruples. They do whatever they have to do to stay in power. It's not going to be the same with Petrismo right now than before 3 years ago, because circumstances have changed. And the same thing happened. Those that I call the same are the same, because although they try to say that the Colombia was doing very well, it's just no, it's not really. Petro has misgoverned, but Petro won because the previous administration was so bad that there was a vote of punishment against those previous administrations. A large number of people voted not for Petro, but against the previous administration. So the circumstances are completely different because the conditions are different. I believe that these conditions. I saw a very nice movie about a young girl going around the world in a sailboat, and in the middle of the sea, there was no wind. She got without a wind for several days. She had the same wind. She had the same skills, but there was no wind. She couldn't move. So if I understand you right, um, Jorge Enrique, the failure 3 years, 4 years ago was more because of political maneuvers, uh, uh, mismanagement, and not the message itself. Now, under the circumstances which are more favorable for the same message. Yes, that's true because At the end of the day, he said, if Harden or myself, or we're not changing our positions because the problems of the country are basically the same. Now, Petro hasn't corrected any of the problems that we had. Maybe it made it worse, but we have a number of things that have changed, but the problems are the same. The main reason, if we hadn't made the mistakes that we made 3 years ago, uh, we also have we would also have lost because the conditions were too adverse against us. That's why I give you an example. Yeah, when the sailor has no wind, he has to be patient. Right now, the conditions are favorable to us, not for them. If you want to be a candidate for Petro, it's going to be a lot of masochists. And the one before, you know, before 2022, it's, you have to be a masochist if you want to do that same platform. I'll say that one of the major advantages that this third option is has to do with the fact that in previous elections there was a clarity of what the government had done in previous administration, but not the other one. Now we have a clarity about what they both have done. So I think it's more they're working on an empirical basis, not on a hypothesis, and that gives you major advantages. But continue with what you were saying is, Ken was saying, you say that the center, you don't like that word because it's geometric, and I agree that the idea of considering uh, the center as a equidistant from both ends is not useful. It should not be, it will be, standing in the middle. That cannot be the motivation. But one of the things that the left does very well, and also the right do it well, and the party is in those two spaces, is to become what the politologists have always thought that the political parties have to do, is to be, take mental shortcuts for people. You can ask every citizen to have in their mind all the positions about all the topics in the world, and that's why political parties help people uh, uh, quickly to identify some positions about the issues that they care about in either side. And if you ask us, what would you say from the left of that? What would somebody from the right say about that? You can find some fast answers. That hasn't happened with the third or with the third option. Uh, we're discussing uh, this topic because of the struggle against corruption. But if you tell somebody, well, the topic of insecurity or security, you know exactly the topic of security was a huge failure with the left, left because the left had never thought seriously about security, and also I have the right who had what many people believe was major successes against insurgents when we have a clear, definite discourse against security. A third option is an option that considers that the military apparatus, defense and security has to be sound, professional. That struggle that they have to fight, uh, following technical principles without abandoning the issue of rights and freedoms. But there's another whole bunch of topics that I'm not sure that this third road, third option can become a shortcut for people. People still find it difficult to find, in addition to corruption and what's in the end, the extremes, what the public policies, what does that uh, mean to be a force like yours? Are there some movements in any direction to, yeah, I think that Alejandro Gaviria said, well, being from the center is being a liberal from top to bottom. I see you, and I said, from my economic point of view, is not so much. because your discourse in economics is not a liberal discourse. So where exactly, somebody who says, I want to vote based on my ideas and uh, emotions vis-a-vis certain things, can I meet that in the center? It's not the issue. It's not an easy issue. Uh, we, will go arranging the things as we go along. The thing we created with Senatorial, we have a position in favor of developing the economy, a, having to do good for the small producers, the medium-sized, large producers, the indigenous individuals, the, even the entrepreneurs, as well. For example, in my case, all my life, I've been trying to defend the development of the economy of the business class, and I'll come to the Senate to continue to work, talk about it because I have been proven right. We have a serious crisis in rice, potatoes, and cocoa because all the free trade model and opening is contrary to the progress of the country. So now these are pretty complex issues, but all of these things we have to define, and we have to define in the program how they're going to propose it. Some things that we are different, or at least myself, I'm very much different from Gustavo Petro, and it's not the same people, the same things. Defend the entrepreneurs and long-lived entrepreneurs. So it's those who have governed here in the 100 years previously. You have to say why the business economy is so weak. Uh, why they not explain it? That's that that's part of it. Unless we have a contradiction here. So the Petro's business discourse is stupid. It's not because it's not because of they are entrepreneurs, because they are corrupt. That's what it is. When I find a when I clash with an entrepreneur or a businessman, it's not because of who they are businessman, because of what they have done. It's all of them. With capital of $7,000 or $8,000, we will never solve absolutely any of the national problems because what what we dream of is to being like the developed countries. If we want to do that, we create wealth as they do it in the developed countries. The informality would be the lowest possible. Otherwise, they'd give up their dreams. And just they say that this country will be underdeveloped forever. These are things that we're trying to build on, and that at least separate between me from everybody else. They already failed, the big ones, and this one is failing. After 7 August, uh, August next year, they will all be failures. Petro looks every time more like the previous administrations. And that's a fact. This this is a picture that you can look at.
Bueno, siguiendo un poco, Jorge, la pregunta de Sandra.
Sandra's question:
Hay un dicho que uno si tiene muchas prioridades, es decir,
if you
no tiene ninguna prioridad.
have a lot of priorities, you really don't have any.
Cuando yo
So
escucho los
when I
mensajes
heard
hasta ahora,
the messages from the center today
unos candidatos, yo
of
escucho
some of the candidates, I hear
varias prioridades.
several
Entonces,
priorities.
podemos
So
decir,
can we say,
según
okay,
su interpretación
according to your
de la
interpretation
realidad, ¿qué
of the
serían
situation, is
los
what
tres
would be
mensajes
the three
más importantes
most
para
important
esta
messages
tercera opción?
for the third option? We are emphasizing heavily on corruption. I don't remember if Sandra remembers. we're emphasizing that heavily. But another important thing is select elections force you to guide 3 or 4 uh, topics. He says in 30 seconds, tell me what is going on in Colombia. So you have to say 3 words to explain everything. But he says the president comes in and he has to look at the entire economy of the country. What we have to build and we're going to launch is a program that is going to have a lot of things. But the other thing is the political emphasis because the politician is has to talk about things according to the polls. So those who listen to us, please look at who Fajardo has been or who have I been. Uh, who have several books published about the debate of my life. We have to solve everything. So Sergio has, as I do, a position of a huge importance to education, public education, but also private, because what Petro has just done of hit the finances of these takes because hitting the kids in the lower socioeconomic levels, it's absurd. Since well, all the money is for the poorest, and they have to go to a public university. There's no extremely expensive universities, but there's a huge number that are 90% of those credits are for very poor people. Uh, it's very strange. They want to classify those rated 1, 2, or 3 uh, levels, and the others are for like somewhat despicable. That is the reality in this country. We have to assemble all of this is a lot of difficult process. We have to define who is on one side or the other, because the cheats, the thieves have been successful. If 1% had been of the promises they've made had been fulfilled, Colombia would be a paradise. Because everything is the elections are won with lies, based on lies. We renegotiate the free trade agreements with the U.S. This is he took over office in August 7th, but in about 10 August, his foreign trade minister had said was saying that he would renegotiate anything. So that's the great fraud of something that is capital importance for the economy of the country. And that can change in half hour, and nobody says anything about it. So that's why I insist I'm more interested in who are the people, and those who are the ones that are, you know, giving the talk. You can speak, you can say anything when you look and see the reality. What are they really? Part of the problem is before going to the foreign policy, one of the problems we have is the weakness of our political parties. This is the reason why we have to be very, very careful with people's character, because the parties have no way of assuring that they will be keeping their promises. This huge number of candidates. I think in electoral processes of the recent times, we haven't seen such a picture with so many, many people, pre-candidates. Anybody can be a presidential candidate in this country looking at the picture. But if you look about this, of the parties, tell us about if you come to the president, how would you handle the Congress? Because we've seen both in Duque and the Petro administrations, we had a very similar thing happen. It's that both administrations try to start that relationship with Congress by imposing their own. They said, this is not going to work like it used to. This is not uh, officers. We're going to do things right. And both administrations had to back down. They had uh, to give in to all the, the contracts, the negotiating under the table because none of them was a majority, and because if you want to produce some reforms through the institutional way, life, we couldn't, at least not in these two administrations. It would work like this. They were both right and left to try to do something different, and neither could. What is your plan? We haven't sold our life to the devil. Our Pedro didn't sell. He didn't do the deal with the devil before August. He sold it before. One of the major financiers of the campaign, one of the major contractors for the administration, had already dealt with the devil before that. So he says, not a surprise. Petro won with the votes from the traditional, corrupt traditional forces they had. I can prove it. So that Fajardo has a huge advantage. Uh, I'm summarizing this because of his origin, Medellin. Fajardo could have been do his life major business, or he had to do math teacher. He gave up all of that. After 20 years of being a professor in mathematics, he decided that he wanted to be a mayor of Medellin. He could have called his friends in Medellin. His mother just said, okay, that, he could have set up a political caucus to be elected mayor. He won the elections cleanly. No undesirable parties walking around the streets in an old Jeep Willys through any government with the political pleasures. And he was recognized as the best mayor and the best governor. I hope that the experience can help here to rule this country without having to deal with the devil. So why the hell did we win? One thing about he's been said that he's not wishy-washy anything. He is convinced, he has ethical thoughts, and he will not give in.
Jorge, tomando eso,
So if he wins the presidency, he will be able to govern like he governed Medellin and Antioquia. He didn't mistreat anybody, or it's a civilized relationship with his rivals, but he didn't govern with them. He governed with his team, who I guaranteed he was able to do things right. Sandra is going to talk about international relations. The example of Fajardo and Antioquia is very interesting, and it's worth. But he also lost horribly in Antioquia in the last two elections. So, what does he need? Why did he lose by a lot? So, what does he need to do, or he or somebody from the center, to get more votes? Get other people in Antioquia. How is he going to win against get more votes from the right or the center right to say? Decisions are not easy.
Entiendo eso.
We tell the people from Antioch this, all this history. So it came from the mayor. He was not giving it to the political uh, elites. They all asked him to be the candidate. He said no, including some Antiochians. He says it's convincing. Somebody must convince him. What only Medellin and Antioquia. They asked his parents and his future, what was the governor and mayor's the assistant? He faced a crime and violence in Antioquia. And about that, he was always trying to lie. We have some CVs that anybody can look at. And I hope the people in Antioquia, the smartest people in terms of Antioquia, uh, listen to this. This administration is going to be bad, but we can have worse presidents because if this country doesn't resolve the structural problems, where 30% of the people, where 30% of the people have less than 3 meals a day, we have more than 30% of the population in poverty. We're going to be very, very poor shape. This is something I leave you to the Antiochians and to entire Colombia. You are going to be trying, repeating the same, you know, electing the same people, including Petro, I mean, including Petro among the same old ones. Or are we going to provide a different alternative? You have the Fajardo's CV. You can look at it. What can they say against him? The basic problem in politics is this is it, and I agree with this, is that we do politics as public servants. We're not upcoming. We're not looking after applause or uh, little strange visions. This is the key. Nobody can be a good politician if they don't define their vocation as political, as public servants. My decision for life is that I'm not going to do major businesses, but I make a living with architecture. In my the center of my life is to be the politics as a public servant, which is I don't think that it's non-existent, but it's very rare to find somebody who comes to politics to serve the country and not to serve themselves. This is so confusing in Colombia that those who think like that, they think that we're stupid. That they're, since you have to be sharp. You have to be, you know, uh, you, you you have to be friends with everybody. So it's you, we waive the support from 11 million Colombians. This is Serie Fajardo. What to do is a different thing. Uh, we need somebody different. That's what we need in Colombia. I refuse to be forced to say choose between AIDS and hepatitis B. I mean, I like to choose somebody who is totally different. The uh, the similarity with Petro and previous administrations is immaterial. Everyone has its own way. Petro's contribution, uh, the results are the same. Is the high-sounding language. He's a he's a seller of anger to cover his mistakes. And others might have had the same language, but results is the same. Thank you, Jorge Enriquez. I'm going to leave your ask question about foreign policy for later, for the future. We've been extremely interesting. We've been moving forward, with uh, steady steps to try to identify and sort of, thank you. First thing you have to do is, it says where not to be, where you choose not to be. That's a key point in everything in life. Where not to be, because you go wrong in where you're going to be. You have a mistake. Maybe, maybe by not being there, you might also be wrong, but it's an advantage not to deal with the devil. Yeah, better recognize he has to deal with the devil. Then he tried to say no, but he did. We know that he's all he dealt with the devil. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, Enrique and Sandra and Ken, for this great dialogue. And thank you, everybody, for being with us. Today, I invite you to follow us on social networks to uh, keep up to date with the next episodes. And our videos are going to be on our website later today. Thank you for being with us again. Thank you, Enrique, once again. And I'll see you next time. Bye.